on to our final speaker for this session. We have Emily Neilson, who is a dairy farmer from the Hunter Valley. Emily also has a very strong passion for education and has started up a dairy education business as well. Her and her partner have been farming in the Hunter Valley since 2015, and she's going to share some of her views on the challenges of the educated consumer. Over to you, Emily. Just remember to unmute and share your screen. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Sabrina. Okay, so I'm Emily Neilson. I am a dairy farmer in the Hunter Valley, as Sabrina said. 5 years ago, my husband and I started our journey as dairy farm business owners when we leased a property, bought a herd of cows, and fitted out the property's existing walk-through dairy, which hadn't been used for 13 years. Over 5 years, we've built our herd from a total of 77 cows with no replacements to a total of around 150 head, including milkers and replacements. It's been an interesting journey. We've battled floods and several years of the worst drought ever seen in the Hunter. We've battled unsustainable milk prices like everybody, never-ending breakdowns, and a steep learning curve that every new farm business owner must go through. But all these things can really be put down as part of farming in Australia. But there's other things that we have battled that you don't necessarily think about or prepare yourself for as you go into farming. Throughout our journey, we have watched the increasing amount of animal activist activity that has occurred. We've seen social media posts and stories that incorrectly educate people about farming practices. We've seen incorrect news articles written about farmers that don't include all the details, and the minute details the journalist leaves out changes the story entirely. And throughout all of this, a couple of things have become apparent to me. Firstly, people consider themselves to be very well educated about things these days. I saw it written somewhere once that social media makes experts out of everyday people. And I've seen this occur over and over when a person reads or sees something on Facebook and believes themselves to know all about the topic simply from reading that one thing. Unfortunately, it is often true that whatever they have read or seen didn't actually tell a lot of truths, but it was shocking in its presentation and therefore is remembered by the viewer. And this misinformed, undereducated person will fight to the death for the opinion that they formed through reading the article or seeing the picture of the emaciated calf that stated that this is how calves are treated on dairy farms. The second thing I have noticed is that it takes a lot of positive media and positive information to counteract something negative. And in this, the dairy industry is not very well represented. It is getting better though. Every farm that starts a Facebook page that spreads positive vibes about the farm's goings on, and every farmer who opens their doors to the media to be frank and honest with a positive spin does a lot of good. But there's a long way to go. Lastly, I have noticed that for the most part, there are more people for the farmers than against us. People do value fresh food, and they do recognise that farmers work hard to produce that fresh food. But the relationship is fragile and easily unbalanced. With all of this in mind, I started a consumer education business on my farm called Farm Visit. The program invites consumers to bring their families and friends to the farm for an experience which is both positive and exciting. We have nothing to hide, we are authentic, and we are honest. The biggest part of what I do through Farm Visit is answering the tough questions, often before they're asked. I need to be upfront, open, and transparent with what we do, how we do it, and why. I've had all kinds of people visit the dairy. Some consider themselves to be very well educated, like the mothers who tell their children that no, darling, only bulls have horns. Others haven't got a clue and are curious. All of them, though, are interested. But the very fact that I can create a business from people visiting my dairy farm highlights a major issue within the industry. Overall, we are closed gate people. We don't want intruders on our farm taking up valuable time, asking questions they should already know the answers to, and seeing things we don't want them to see. Which begs the question, why are there facets of dairying we don't want the consumer to see? If we don't want the consumer to know what we are doing in the process of producing milk, are we not doing something incredibly wrong? The answers to these questions introduce a whole new bunch of questions that we as an industry need to put more effort into answering. The questions might be, well, what are we supposed to do? We can't rear all our bull calves, there's no market. Or they might be, calves do die, it's not a perfect system, isn't that normal? As we move forward into the future, consumers are going to become more and more vocal and demanding. They are going to become educated for or against milk production and how it's done. It's up to us as the farmers to help them attain the correct education. It's no one else's job. I believe that it would be prudent of us as farmers and industry professionals not to resent the curious consumer who looks for answers and craves information on what is going on behind the closed gates. I believe that we should embrace these people. These are the change makers, the influencers. These are the people who will buy branded products and pay a bit more because they've made a connection with the product through their positive on-farm education. There should be more of these. But these could also be the people who begin to demand change. There's an ever-increasing trend towards health food and consuming only the best products. This, I believe, will increase. Into the future, the general consumer may begin to reject food that is produced with chemicals of any sort. The demand for totally organic product may become the norm rather than the minority. And this is really just one example of the demands they may develop. So how do we combat this? While no farming system is perfect, I do believe that we should very carefully scrutinise our farming practices and be very honest with ourselves as an industry. We should stop considering the issues we might have with bull calves, organic farming, overuse of antibiotics, or anything else to be issues, and start looking at them as opportunities to do something great, to create change, to develop better systems that will not only look better from the outside, but will be more profitable for our businesses. There's got to be a way to become more profitable without doing things you hope the consumer will never find out, simply because it's how it's always been done. We as dairy farmers need to be proud of our industry. We need to be positive when we talk about it to others outside of farming. We need to share our passion for what we do with the people who are buying the milk we work so hard to harvest every day. And we need to aim to be always trying to do what we do better. It's my opinion that the only way to succeed into the future will be to develop our farming systems and meet the demands of the consumer before they come. I don't have the answers on how we can do it, and the way it's done will be different for every farm and every farmer. But if we look at problems positively and see them as opportunities, we may just be able to work together for the common good. I have a friend who's a vegan. She considered herself to be educated about dairy farming and told me once that she didn't agree with it because the cows were made pregnant all the time. I took this on board, and it's now something I always make sure I touch on during a farm visit. Consumers generally don't know that a cow, once she has calved and begins lactating, won't produce milk forever at a profitable level. And neither should she. Everyone deserves a break now and then. But explaining that there is a cycle, that we line up their next pregnancy with their full lactation and then a short break, and that the cows enjoy coming back to the milking herd, creates a whole new image for people to take home with them. I've also discovered that there is a way to talk about everything from a holistic view. I add in that we cannot force the cow to go back in calf, and that she shows us when she's ready to do so by coming in season. People accept this information without criticism. This same friend of mine was out of work once and I was desperate for a milker. She did have livestock experience and ended up milking for us for some time. During this time, we had a cow calve earlier than expected, and her calf was with her for a week before we could shift them to the dairy. As it was her job to feed the calves at this time, my friend had the job of quietening and feeding said calf, and it was no easy task. As you can imagine, after a week with Mum, the calf wanted nothing to do with people and showed it. My friend saw the difference between the calves that were taken from their dams early and this calf and commented on it. She said it was obviously better for the calves to be separated from the cows early on, and she could tell this through her own observation. The calves born at the dairy were calm, quiet, and experienced little to no stress, compared to this one who bellowed for Mum for days. I loved that this was an experience my friend had and an observation she made. She's still a vegan, but her negative view of the industry changed dramatically through her positive experience while working at our dairy, and I thought that was great. Did you know that most people living in the cities, regardless of their age, don't know where milk comes from? Many think it's made similarly to soft drink, in a machine with all the ingredients added in, just like almond milk and rice milk and all the rest. Many believe that milk is extremely high in fat. It doesn't matter what the bottle says, but why else would they make a low-fat version? Most people associate the word veal with a calf that's 2 days old and been sent to slaughter and won't eat it based on ethical values. Many people believe that cows are milked against their will. Others think that calves we don't raise are left to starve, sitting in their own waste. And others still believe that we push our animals as hard as we can to produce milk for our own profit and then send them to slaughter at the end of their productive life and think nothing of it. These are just some of the misconceptions that are most common. Misconceptions develop through a lack of education. And where is that education meant to come from, if not from the people farming these animals? Why are we so afraid, generally, to have people visit our farms and learn about what we do? I've discovered through my dairy education journey that people are generally accepting about the death of animals if it's explained why it's happened. People do understand that animals die sometimes, even when you look after them and care for them and do the right things to help them. They accept that sometimes during harsh droughts, calves are born dead and the mother never gets up again. Unfortunately, that's part of reality, but we don't need to hide it. If you have done everything you could to care for an animal and it doesn't survive, you have nothing to feel guilty about. Typically, this would be true of the mortalities on dairy farms. It is not profitable for us to lose animals, and most of us will do everything in our power to prevent it from happening. So when it does happen, it's not a sign of neglect or lack of caring. Sometimes it does just happen. The general consumer is more likely to be empathetic to farmers in this situation than to assume they did the wrong thing. What you're looking at the moment is some comments from total strangers on our Facebook page for Farm Visit, and I was just blown away by the response from people that I didn't know. When we look at the key areas that our industry comes under criticism, it comes down to just a few. 1, removing calves from cows. 2, disposal of bull calves. 3, dehorning. And 4, overuse of antibiotics. These are the main 4 issues consumers have with the industry, and whether they're actually issues or not, the consumer has been educated by some form of media that these are issues. Being honest and looking at it from an objective point of view, yes, it does seem cruel to remove a calf from a cow, but we know as farmers that there are so many reasons it's done. Calves are not quiet and easy to handle and treat upon illness if left with the cow. Calves are exposed to a multitude of illnesses when left to suck the cow and run with the herd. And it's simply not financially viable to allow a 3 or 4 month old calf to drink the 15 litres it's quite capable of drinking but doesn't actually need, with other sources of protein present in the diet. Of course, there's more to it than just those points too. But how many of your everyday consumers or possible consumers do you think understand any one of those reasons? How many of them have had it explained to them? How many people don't drink milk or avoid dairy products altogether due to the lack of education about why these things are done? It's time we start reconnecting with the everyday consumers. Time to start educating people for the industry and counteract some of the misconceptions about dairy farming. Maybe it's time to change some of our ideas, some of our systems, and what's accepted as general practice, and open our gates and welcome the curious consumer and their questions. The good of our industry relies on drastic change, both in education, systems, and mentality of both us as the farmers and the consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. That was a really nice perspective from a dairy farmer on the key issues around consumer perspectives, and I think there's some really great talking points there.